To this, Solidarity says it will get actively involved in the generation and selling of electricity in the country. The union has presented plans on how the country's energy crisis can be fixed. For more on this, we are joined by Solidarity Head of Research, Corne Mulder. Mr. Mulder, thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. First of all, who did you present these plans to? And please just share them with us, because it's a huge problem in our country.
Yes, okay, so we've shared these plans wherever we can. We had a media conference yesterday where we released a report. And the goal of the report is to quite simply say, we're in trouble now, but at least it's still going better than next year. And from what we can see energy-wise, there is no light at the end of the tunnel unless we start doing it ourselves. We looked at the status quo, and then we made a quick calculation or projection as to where are we going to be in 2030. So for the viewers out there, at the moment, there's between a 4,000 and a 6,000 megawatt shortage in generation capacity. But Eskom needs to decommission an additional 10,500 megawatt in the next 8 years due to the plants reaching end of life, and 22,000 megawatt in the next 13 years. So that means we're going to phase 20 or phase 22 of load shedding if we don't add any capacity. And from what we can see from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy's integrated resource plan, which is meant to be the master plan that should say where South Africa's energy is coming from, even with perfect execution, absolute perfect execution, no project being late, everything being on time, and the sun shining 24 hours a day and the wind never stops blowing, we're not going to make it. And that just frankly means we need to look in the mirror, say it's been 15 years, government has not been able to solve this, they cannot solve this and they will not solve this. And from what we can see, they don't really want to solve this. And that means the only option left is we need to do it ourselves as communities, as small-scale power generators. And that is why some of the recommendations in the report, we lean on some international examples, but some of the recommendations are we need to decentralize power generation as quickly as possible. The solution to South Africa's power needs most likely lies on the rooftops of every single citizen, not in the corridors of one or more large commercial projects. We need to start doing this as quickly as possible. From our side, we're calling on small-scale generators to apply for a permit to sell electricity, even if it's only 1 kilowatt. Let's get a flood of applications to force open all the bottlenecks that are at the moment holding us hostage.
And Mr. Mulder, yesterday we spoke to former Eskom CEO Jacob Maroga, in fact, on this particular show, and he said Eskom actually has enough electricity. He went on to say that our solution is actually not IPPs because the country actually has about it's because of the 15,000 megawatts of power that has just been completely offline, and that's what's causing this mess. What's your response to him saying that we actually don't need, it's not the solution to get IPPs and alternative power, that actually won't take away the problem of load shedding?
Well, if you drive a car at 200 kilometers an hour for 15 years, something's going to break. The average age of an Eskom power plant, excluding Medupi and Kusile, is 41 years. Now, a power plant has a 50-year lifespan. That means we've been running these plants into the ground. The energy availability factor has dropped from 80% to 64%, and it's only going down. It's not going to get better. That means Eskom is doing everything it possibly can to generate power, and we're generating less power than we did in 2014. I have no idea where his confidence comes from that this will turn around on its own. It just simply won't. From what we can see, even with the government's integrated resource plan, there's no way we're going to generate enough power. The private sector needs to add almost a whole Eskom generation capacity to stay where we are today, already in load shedding. So no, the answer will not be from Eskom or the government. It's just not possible. They cannot solve it that way. What we need is, and that's why we looked at international examples, the one country that has a similar problem with power is Vietnam, it's one of the last proper communist countries. They have only one legal party, the Communist Party, and they started getting rolling blackouts in 2007 as well, due to a high economic growth, however. Finally, in 2017, they decided on radical intervention to solve this, and they implemented a generous feed-in tariff, which basically said, if you get power into the grid, specifically solar power into the grid in the next year, we will buy your power at a generous rate for the next 20 years, so guaranteeing a return on investment for investors. And this worked spectacularly well. In 1 year, they went from 150 megawatts of solar power to 4,500 megawatts of solar power generation capacity. They upped this tariff in 2019, and then they added an additional 9,000 megawatts in 1 year, between December 2019 and December 2020, of which 6,000 megawatts was added in 1 month in December 2020. Now, this is a feed-in tariff is not a new policy. We've done that before. We've got the capacity. We can solve this. We can get it done. But we're going to need to do it ourselves.
And I hear you say we can solve this, but of course, in most cases, especially with IPPs and other bigger plans, we do need government's buy-in, and we do need their signature, the different ministers' signatures on those dotted lines in every contract for us to actually get to that point of having many other options of alternative power. So in the meantime, as citizens, especially the poor citizens, we feel like between a rock and a hard place. We feel like we're being held hostage by Eskom because, there's nothing we can do. There's a lot of poor people in South Africa who have no idea what they can do, so they just sit in the dark. What's the solution in terms of the plans that you laid out yesterday? What is it that you think citizens should be doing, especially the poor?
Well, from our perspective, you're correct, but it's one of the major problems is the fact that every single project needs government approval. We don't understand why the registration process for small-scale generation is as onerous as it is, and that is why we're calling on everyone who can, every single one. We need solar panels on every mall, every farmer needs to put it up, every mine needs to put it up, and apply in hundreds of thousands to this. So this should be a registration process. This should be an online portal somewhere where you just put your name in a database, I'm going to generate power, and then let the guys who connect you to the grid sort out the technical details at that point. So from our perspective, put pressure on, apply if you can. If you've got one solar panel, apply and say that you want to sell power back to the grid. But we're also saying the government should, honestly, they've now been stuck in the headlights for 15 years. They need to move or at least let us go and do it ourselves. We cannot continue like this. At the moment, the regulatory environment allows for small-scale generation. Why isn't this going through? Why are we still having bottlenecks? And that is why we're personally applying. We've got a property development company, Canton, and we've decided we're now going to start generating power, selling power, applying, getting through the processes, making sure that all the bottlenecks are removed so that we can finally get out of this nightmare that we've been living the last 15 years. Any country without electricity stability or energy stability has no chance in the coming economical turmoil with the fourth industrial revolution. And we should not be left behind. We cannot have people standing on street corners because we're determined to have centralized power generation.
All right. Well, thank you very much for speaking to us. That was Solidarity Head of Research, Connie Mulder.